Welcome to the. Oh man, I can't beat her. I just can't beat her. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. Kenny, what's going on there in Cleveland, where you are about to host the NBA All-Star Game? The weekend looks totally different. Is there a buzz there? Is there excitement in the air? I saw that glance briefly at 76ers Bucks last night, halftime. I saw that the TNT show was coming from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame there in Cleveland, where they did the show there last night. And I think they're doing like a Manning cast during the game as well. You know, Shaq, Barkley, and Kenny Smith and Ernie.
Oh.
They're just gonna watch the game and kind of talk about it. And I think they're gonna do it from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame there. So, is there a buzz there in Cleveland?
Yeah, there is. You have a little bit of the like a lot of people kind of go on NBA theme with stuff. I don't know if you know this. The mayor is part of the celebrity game tonight.
Okay.
Which that's kind of interesting. The crazy part though is it was nice and warm yesterday. All the snow melted, and then we got more snow. So we've had snow on the ground for like almost a month now.
Wow.
But I think everyone's really excited. I'm looking forward to the skills challenge. I also love that there are Cavs players in the All-Star game. I always think that that's going to be special.
Yeah.
Also be interesting to see kind of the reception that LeBron gets. But yeah, I would say that that it is like it's exciting. Cleveland's had now in the last few years both the NBA and the MLB All-Star game, and they also had the NFL draft. So
the NFL
Cleveland's
draft,
a place to be.
Okay. Was that already there, the NFL draft, or is that coming up there?
It was either last year or the year before.
Oh, it was there. Right. I thought I remember that. Okay. Yeah, exciting time. And I have to say, I'll probably tune in to the NBA All-Star game, probably like second half-ish. I'll watch some of the stuff over the weekend, whatever I can catch. They're starting to bring me back a little bit. I'm still traditionalist, like East versus West, but I do like how they play. They're starting to play hard these last couple of years. I don't need to see a lot of dunks, you know. Come on, you know. So Obi Toppin is in the. He's like the favorite to win it this year. What are your thoughts on the slam dunk?
I've kind of soured a little bit on the slam dunk contest.
Okay.
I mean, it's there, it's fun, but it's like, whatever.
All right.
You know?
Okay. All right. Well, we're a few days late, and so we didn't get a chance to recap the Super Bowl. There's probably actually a good time to do that because the dust has settled. Champion was crowned. It was, I thought, a really good game. Was it the best Super Bowl? Maybe not. Although, you know, the comeback there by the Rams late was spectacular, I thought. So give me your overall assessment on Super Bowl 56.
First, I have to give you a clap. You called this from day one.
Yeah.
With the Rams winning.
And that never happens for me because I'm a terrible predictor, which is why I don't bet. I don't bet for other reasons now, but I just thought Matthew Stafford to the Rams was just the perfect trade. I think he was exactly what they needed. So thank you.
Yeah, but I agree with you though. Matt Stafford showed once again why the Rams basically mortgaged their future to be holding up the Lombardi Trophy. The connection between him and Cooper Kupp has been something that's been spectacular to watch this year. Cooper Kupp, I saw, it was kind of an interesting thing. He has won Offensive Player of the Year, won the Triple Crown in receiving, so receptions, yards, and touchdowns, and also Super Bowl MVP. One other receiver has done that, some guy named Jerry Rice.
Wow.
And he didn't do it all in the same year the way that Cooper Kupp did.
Yeah.
So quite impressive. But
very impressive.
Regardless, I think, like you said, I think it was a really good game. I think there was a lot of worry that after such an amazing playoffs, probably the best playoffs of my lifetime for the NFL, that the Super Bowl would be a little bit of a letdown, and it wasn't.
Mhm.
I know there's been a lot of talk about some of the questionable calls, the face mask on Jalen Ramsey,
Oh,
some
that
of
was
the
a
holds at
terrible
the
no
end.
call, man. That was a
Yeah.
terrible no call.
But like to me, yeah, there was a couple of egregious ones. A couple of the holds towards the end of the game seemed kind of ticky tacky. But once again, I kind of always point back to you still got to win the game. Um, the Bengals did not show up that well in the second half, despite really putting the pressure on. But really, I think one of the bigger stories is that defensive line for the Rams. Aaron Donald, I don't know if you saw this, but he basically made the same exact play to get them to the Super Bowl as
Yeah.
he did to essentially win it.
Yeah.
Definitely a guy that's worked hard and deserves a ring. Sean McVeigh too. It's crazy seeing I've seen a couple clips of him this week where they ask him random game and around what time, and he'll recite the play and the defensive scheme that he was going against. And
Wow.
guy's a genius when it comes to football. So
Yeah.
So really, I think for me the biggest takeaway is, like, yes, building through the draft is important. The Rams have a couple players like that, but they've kind of shown an interesting model to win a Super Bowl. Trading for Matthew Stafford, trading for Jalen Ramsey, getting guys like Von Miller and OBJ to get in. It's not the typical way because they don't have a draft pick for a number one or a first rounder for a while, but it seems to be working. I'll ask a question, but before I get there, I also feel really bad for OBJ. I feel happy for him.
Yeah.
Because I'm happy he got a ring. I wish it was in Cleveland or in New York.
Yeah.
As opposed to LA. But good for him for getting a ring. But also it really stinks that he probably tore his ACL again.
Yeah.
And hopefully he could come back. But like tearing the ACL a second time on the same knee, especially as a wide receiver, it just kind of makes you think, I don't know if he's ever going to be the same.
Yeah.
But we also thought that he was washed up when he was in Cleveland and had quite the resurgence. And I mean, he did score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So, so I'm going to ask you this question. Now, both the Rams and the Bengals put themselves in a really good position. Who do you think is more likely to make it back to the Super Bowl within the next 5 years?
The next 5 years, I think the Bengals. I think the Bengals have a great foundation. I think they have Mcveigh gets a lot of credit, well deserved. I don't think Mcveigh is going to be there for 5 more years. I think McVeigh is ticketed for the broadcast booth. And he talked a lot about work-life balance this past year. And I think the Rams will probably be due for a little bit of a drop-off with the lack of draft picks, although they can get creative and get, some first-rounders. And I think that their team will probably get a little old relatively quick. The Bengals, on the other hand, I think Burrow is a franchise quarterback, clearly. I think they're only going to get better. I think you'll see them, and I think the Browns will probably be their big competition next year. I know Tennessee's, still going to be good, I believe. But I think the Steelers without Roethlisberger now will have a bit of a drop-off, although, they've got a Hall of Fame coach, I think. So I just think the Bengals will be really good in the AFC, next year and over these next couple of years. It's hard to keep teams together in football. Free agency, they move around a lot, and then, you could have, you're one injury away. But if I was, that's a great question. I would say that I think the Bengals are set up more long-term. I think the Rams were a little bit more of a win-now team. I could see Stafford giving a couple of, 2-3 more really, really good years. I think they're going to lose their coach, and he's going to be hard to replace. I think that, I think that some of these players that thrive, even Aaron Donald talking about, retirement. early retirement, heading to the broadcast booth maybe. He's got a big personality as well. So I think they'll lose a few key pieces, especially if McVeigh, walks away. And I don't know if McVeigh will walk away this year. He might give it one more year, see if he can win another title. But the 5 years, I would say Bengals.
Yeah, I would say if we're talking very, very short term, like next year, there's no reason why the Rams wouldn't be the favorites, especially if Aaron Rodgers leaves the NFC. For me, it's a little tougher for the Bengals to go the distance because you got a lot of guys that could get in the way. Mahomes is still there.
Yeah.
You got Josh Allen.
Yeah.
You got Justin Herbert. You got whoever's with the Browns. Lamar Jackson is still there. But Burrow has kind of shown that he could beat anybody. So, but you look also at the NFC. The Saints lost Sean Payton. The Bucks lost Tom Brady. Like, who else is going to be good next year aside from the Rams? Maybe the Packers. The 49ers will probably move off of Jimmy G. So let's say they have Trey Lance, like rookie quarterback, or like second year. There's the drama with Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. Russell Wilson might not stay either. So I think that'll be interesting. My last thing on the Super Bowl, this is an Instagram post from Cooper Kupp's wife, where she says, "This moment, these moments, thanking God for every one of them. We have prayed for a season to glorify our Savior Jesus Christ. And you're doing just that, my lovely Cooper Kupp." Surreal. So kind of interesting there. But
you sent me a great article a couple of weeks ago about Cooper Kupp. And if you haven't read about him and you want to really hear about faith and that strong, abiding faith, here's a guy that no one was going to take a chance on, not only from high school to college, from college to the NFL. And for him to do what he did and still glorifying Jesus along the way was just unbelievable. I think that, to me, the biggest play of the game was when he made that fourth down run and he cut back when they handed it to him in the backfield. I thought that kept that drive going, obviously, because it was fourth down. But it was such a big play, and just the Bengals' body language after that, because the Rams didn't really have anybody else to throw to. Everybody else was being covered, and there were a couple of drops with the other guys. So you knew he had to go to Cooper Kupp. You wonder why they didn't put 2 or 3 guys on him. But despite the fact that they knew he was going, he still came through. I thought he was just so determined to get them into the end zone, and as with Stafford. So, and so to me, that was my key of the game. Just that one play was just spectacular. Here's my last thing on the Super Bowl. We get, Odell Beckham Jr. has been a little bit nutty over the years. He's done some things that make people scratch their head. He's, a bit of a showboater, but he's always backed it up, and he was backing it up in the first half. He was having a spectacular first half. I'm sure he loved getting the spotlight, with the purple hair and everything, and then to see him get hurt. But here's what stood out to me, because I think that we just sometimes think we can have it both ways. We kill athletes when we don't think that they care as much as we do, about them. And then we wind up killing them when they show the emotion that he did. I don't know. It was at least 3 or 4 shots of him openly weeping on the sidelines. And I think the first part was the realization that he couldn't go back in the game. So here's a guy that wants to compete. He wanted to play. And then the realization when they were losing, and then the realization that they had won. I mean, it just to see that type of emotion from a guy who I don't know, at times hasn't had the best reputation in the NFL in terms of, his commitment. A lot of folks, and you're closer to it than any of us. A lot of folks think he bailed on Cleveland, and yeah, maybe he did, but I have to say, man, he rose to the moment. in that first half, and for him to show the emotion. But Cooper Kupp, well-deserved MVP. Glory to God with him. And if you haven't read his story, I would just Google him and read his stories, you know. So anyway, and I just got to notice that my computer's going to restart in about 13 minutes. So we're going to have to go fast here a little bit. But let's shift over to the Knicks. You know, 28-point lead the other night, which I watched almost that whole game. Just my range of emotions, and I'm sure yours was too. And everybody that was at the Garden was, yes, uh-oh, and oh my gosh, no, and then was just like angry, you know. So the Nets without any of their big players, and Cam Thomas, oh my gosh, this guy was unbelievable. Very, very good college player, LSU if I remember right. And I hadn't heard as much about him, but boy, oh boy, he torched the Knicks that night. But there's a bigger problem with the Knicks because then, you know, 2 weeks ago, the game with the Lakers, again, spectacular first half, slowly, but I couldn't kill them too much that night because it's LeBron James, you know, that led the comeback. And then Portland, you know, and they were up by 23 right at the end of the third quarter. I think about a minute left, and Portland started their run. I didn't see any of that game, so I you know, my emotions weren't that bad. I was like you, I was getting the update, and I couldn't believe I got the update that they lost. You know, I'm like, what? And then this one. So, what's your take? What is going on with this team? Julius Randle straightened himself out. He's probably the last 10 games he's played great, but you know, and they are missing their second best player, RJ, you know, for the last 4 games, but you can't lose that game. And you can't lose the Monday night game. To me also was, you know, to Oklahoma City, a team that's rebuilding, that's trying to get to the lottery, you know. I'm speechless. I'm at a loss. So let me hear from you.
Yeah. Well, I'll just start out with this. Knicks right now are 28-34. No, 25-34.
9 games under.
I didn't think about the OKC game. So let's add that in there. Because like most teams, yeah, you'll lose a double-digit lead here and there. Even the best teams do that. But let's say they win these 4 games. The 3 where they've had a 20-point lead and blew it. And then the OKC game, they would be 29-30. And like there you could kind of be talking about like, all right, so maybe we can kind of sneak into the playoffs. Maybe then we can kind of at least make some noise. At this point, I'm like, nah, it's not worth it. Because even if they go to the number 10 seed and win the play-in tournament and then get swept by Miami, what have you accomplished? What are they like at this point? What do they have that they can actually go and play for? Like winning the play-in tournament? Right now it's number 1 is Miami, number 2 is Chicago. I don't want to play any of those teams in the first round.
They're not beating either one of those.
And yeah. I would probably bet to say that Philadelphia will probably move up there. Do you want to face James Harden and Joel Embiid? Joel Embiid is looking like he's going to have an MVP type season. James Harden is feeling like he's going to play basketball, and when he does, he's really good at it. Like, I don't want any part of them. Like, it's one thing to lose a big lead to, say, like a Milwaukee or a Chicago or a Phoenix. But, like, they lost the big leads to a Lakers team. Yeah, they had LeBron, but also Russell Westbrook was getting booed every time he was touching the ball.
Yeah, they're a depleted team. Yeah.
Portland, they didn't have Dame Lillard. They didn't have any of their guys because they traded them all.
They just traded their 2 other better players. You know, they do have that rookie that's playing really well, but Lillard was out that night, and they just traded their 2 best players. They're aside from Lillard.
Yeah, and then like, yeah, I don't know. also Wednesday to me was the worst. Number one, I think losing to the Nets always stings because it's like that could have been the Knicks with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving choosing Brooklyn over the Garden. But then also you got KD in street clothes. You got Ben Simmons in street clothes. Kyrie Irving isn't allowed in the arena for the vaccine issue. Joe Harris isn't even playing, and you can't even hold a 28-point lead. I think the biggest problem lies in something that you've said earlier. When you live by the three, you die by the three. Everything was going in the first half.
Yep.
Evan Fournier was sinking shots. Kemba Walker had a few. Julius Randle. But then, like, they couldn't buy a bucket in the second half. And I don't know what it is. But it kind of seems like Thibodeau's probably going to be out of the door. And I hate saying that because he's another really good coach that comes to the Knicks and completely underachieves. A la Larry Brown, the hype around Isaiah Thomas.
Mike D'Antoni.
Mike D'Antoni. Phil Jackson, even though he wasn't like the actual coach. Like, there's been so much disappointment just around those guys. Like, oh, okay, this guy's going to be good. This guy's going to be good. And then they're good somewhere else. But I think Thibodeau might be kind of digging his own grave here. Do you have any reason why Taj Gibson is getting more minutes than Obi Toppin and Cam Reddish, and sometimes even more than Emmanuel Quickly? Like, I get you have a soft spot for him, but like, these guys are your future. And if they're not your future, they're guys that you're trading for your future. So, yeah, I don't know. And it seems like they'll probably, all the front office is just going to point the blame at Thibodeau. And yeah, Thibodeau hasn't helped, but it's not his fault.
Listen, you hit everything. And you and I spent a lot of time talking about culture because, we've got some teams here in New York where the culture is really off. The Mets, and hopefully that changes with new leadership. But the Knicks is new leadership, and we were raving about the culture last year. And here's what I wanted to say. And again, this is the fans. We can't have it both ways. We yelled and screamed about Dolan meddling in the past, right? The Carmelo Anthony trade is probably the biggest way he stepped in and said, no, get him now. Where Donnie Walsh was just going to wait. And the Knicks would have been a much better team because they traded the whole team for Carmelo. No knock on Carmelo. But now you have Leon Rose, who I have spoken once to the media in 500 and something days. And Dolan has stayed out of it. Now, it came highlighted because Dolan apparently stormed out with about a minute left, was visibly upset. But he's a fan as well. And listen, I'm not a James Dolan fan, so I can't believe I'm taking up for him here. But he's been relegated. You haven't heard from him the last couple of years, right? Since Thibodeau's been here. And now you want to hear from, the GM because he's different and you thought, he was an agent. You thought you'd hear a lot from him. That it's the same broke culture there. It's everything is a big secret from the fans. They're not transparent enough, and they go just the opposite direction, right? They just clam up nothing, So you have no idea whether Thibodeau is on the hot seat or not. And, I'm not sure that he deserves to be. I just like his track record though now is coming to light, and I'm never a believer that just in 1 year's time, somebody goes from a genius to a bum. I mean, last year we're like, this is one of the best coaches. I mean, he was coach of the year, right? So we're like, this is one of the best coaches in the league. And now he's one of the worst coaches. He had a bad week. There's no doubt, but I can't answer the question on Taj Gibson. I just think because Nerlens Noel keeps getting hurt, and for some reason, he just doesn't play Mitchell Robinson a lot of minutes either. And I think he's afraid because he's also injury prone. And I'm guessing that's why he puts Noel in, because Toppin is definitely not a center. Cam Reddish, obviously, definitely not a center, but there's no doubt those guys, and Quentin Grimes obviously has some game, definitely is going to be a very, very serviceable NBA player. Quickly looked like he came out of his slump, the other night. But I think that he's got kid gloves with Mitchell Robinson when I can't figure that why. Just let him play. He should be playing 30, 35 minutes a night as well as he plays because he's in there. He's playing great every night. And Gibson is serviceable, but I wouldn't be playing him more than, 10 minutes a night. But I think because Noel is hurt, he's been throwing him in there. How do you fix this? I mean, where do you go from here? I'm sure there's pressure because with the playoff games last year, there's revenue, right? And there's excitement. There's no playoffs in the Garden. It's dark again. And the Garden's not going to be dark because the Rangers have built themselves back up and will definitely be in the playoffs. So the Garden won't be totally dark in the spring again, but it'll be dark for the Knicks. And I don't think anybody could have predicted that. You go from 41-31 to where you're, you may not even get close to getting in the playoffs. Where do they go from here?
I think you're looking at an offseason where a big move has to happen. And I don't know where that move is from, but like last year, this time we were talking about Julius Randle being a dark horse MVP candidate. Now I'm saying maybe it's time that you try to look to trade him, but like it's hard because he's got a big salary. I don't know. There's the talk of Donovan Mitchell wanting to come to the Knicks. Do you try to make a deal with Utah? Do you check in on Dame Lillard again? Although I get a little nervous about him because he might be getting a little too old. Do you just kind of tear it up and
I don't know.
Trade a guy like Fournier he's the type of guy that's not that good, but his contract isn't horrible and he does give you a few 20-point nights here and there. I don't know. Like I've seen some people say clean house. I don't know if they have to go that far.
I don't think so either. But if with Julius Randle, and I personally would have, and I'm not second guessing here, when there was talk of moving him at the trading deadline, I didn't want to move him. I felt like, that he's going to find himself. I didn't think last year was an aberration because, again, I'm one of those that remembers Julius Randle in college and how he kind of dominated in college. And I always thought he would be I didn't think he'd be a star in the NBA, but I always thought he'd be a very, very good player. I was more concerned with how thin-skinned he was in New York. And it seems like he's gotten past that a little bit. But here's the thing. The way the NBA works with the salary cap and everything, the time to flip him would have been at the trading deadline simply because a team would have picked him up. And technically his contract is expiring. So they would have had an expiring contract because his new deal doesn't kick in until next year. So that team would, let's just say, I don't know, let's just say Philadelphia would have picked him up for a run at the title, right? Him and Harden, let's say. And they would have had no obligation to him, next year. It could have been like as an expire. I mean, he probably would have made sure that, hey, I've signed this deal. Is good for next year, but technically, and I read this somewhere, that would have been an expiring contract that they would have traded, which would have been attractive to a lot of teams, right? Because it would have lopped off some salary cap. They would have probably been obligated to still pick up his new deal, but they would have also freed up some money to sign someone else. They lost that opportunity. Trading him now in the off season, what are you really going to get for him? It would have to be a really good team that would look for him to be the third person, right, on a team that's ready to go to a championship. And there's some teams like that out there, but what would they give you? They're not going to give you, if they're looking for him to be a third person, I don't know, let's say like Boston, they're not going to give you Jason Tatum for him or even Jaylen Brown, right? So they lost their opportunity with that. I still think they could build around him. And I go back, Van Gundy is so good. Him and Mark Jackson are so good at what they do. And Van Gundy said, I didn't think we'd miss Reggie Bullock and Elfrid Payton. But when I thought back as to how they cleared the floor for him and how they always looked to pass to him, and obviously they missed Derrick Rose. That's not a surprise to me. When he went out, he meant so much, not only last year, but even the beginning of this year, he meant so much to that team. He's such a stabilizing, force. because he's a veteran. He's a veteran point guard, and he's still enormously talented. But some of those role players who thought about defense first, and boy, oh boy, did they need defense the other night on. I'm like, why are we not double team? He's the only guy hitting shots. Him and Seth Curry, they were the only guys hitting shots. Why are we not double teaming this guy as soon as he gets the ball, especially with 2 minutes left? But Bullock is an excellent defensive player, and so was Payton. So it's really odd that he brought those names up, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And that's about a month ago. And I'm like, darn, every night I'm looking at these games, I'm like, he's right. Because remember what you and I were saying last year, the Knicks have to learn to close these games out. Remember they were losing a lot of close games early last year? And we were seeing, hey, man, if they start to win some of these, and they did. But it was because of their defense, which was definitely lacking. You let a team come back from 28 points, your defense, there's something wrong. But there's something embedded in the culture that's not right, because Thibodeau is known for his defense. He's a disciple of Van Gundy, and from Pat Riley and all these guys that put defense first. So it's going to be, I hope it doesn't get ugly over these next few weeks, because I thought it had gotten as ugly as it could get now. I thought we had gotten past the booing of Randall, and I thought they were ready to make a run here, but 9 games under, just play hard, for the rest of the way. I have zero expectations of playoffs. I'm sure you feel same way,
Oh yeah. And I would rather just have the chance at a better lottery pick.
Yeah.
Than
get
knocked out of the playoffs.
Yeah. And listen, Final Fours, the tournament's getting ready to kick off. So you and I will start to pinpoint some of these players that we might want on our team, as we'll see them probably, make some runs in the tournament here. Let's shift gears. This really, really sad story, and I'm not sure if my computer's going to log off, so we'll go as long as we can. But I think it gives a minute where we can wrap up. But the Angels, that whole thing went to trial. They obviously had a guy in their clubhouse who was dealing drugs. And through that, to his credit, he at least, took the stand and he told the truth. Through that, it comes out. First of all, Tyler Skaggs is just unbelievably sad that, he lost his life here. And, due to just, a mixing up of all of these unbelievably terrible drugs that can do so much harm to your body, you would just think an athlete would know better, But and now you have the story here of Matt Harvey, and and I look back to 2013 and look back to him starting the All-Star game, and Happy Harvey Day and him being the Dark Knight, and then it just falling off, and him admitting that there was even use when he was on the Mets. And baseball does, aside from steroids, they don't have a really vigorous drug testing thing. So he probably got away with this for a long time, but he was into some pretty heavy, hardcore drugs. But he says it obviously got worse when he got to the Angels because it was so easily available. So what was your take when I sent you that article? And I'm sure you've read it anyway because it's made national news on what's happened with Matt Harvey, and I'd love to see him now, rise up from all this. But man, oh man, just a horrible, horrible story.
Yeah, don't want to mess the computer up here. It really surprised me. Well, I was shocked when I first read it, like, wow, he was really heavy into cocaine and everything else essentially. But then, like, when I was really thinking about it, it kind of seemed weird how quickly Matt Harvey dropped off. Like, the guy was, like you said, starting the All-Star game, was the superstar. Remember, in that rotation, it was Matt Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, and then that guy as an afterthought was Jacob deGrom.
Yeah.
The first two guys are nowhere near where they are or where they should be.
Right.
And it was such a big story, too, in 2015 when Matt Harvey was pulled because of an innings limit in the World Series.
Yeah.
So, like, you look at it and you're like, man, this guy just kind of dropped off out of nowhere. Like, And he wasn't that old. It wasn't like he had a ton of really bad injuries. But like now you look at it and it kind of makes a little bit of sense. And it's sad that it makes sense in this way. Um, I really, first of all, I really hope that he gets the help that he needs. But I think most importantly, like when you're dealing with stuff, you've got to make sure that you get the help that you need. Um, and it seems like between him, Tyler Skaggs, and a lot of the guys in the Angels, like they weren't getting the help that they need. Um, and this trainer, like, I mean, I know he was found guilty yesterday. I don't know. That just looks really bad. And something that people were kind of saying is, well, yeah, this happens a lot in professional athlete circles.
Really?
It shouldn't.
It should. Yeah. Wow.
Like the only reason that we're hearing all about this is because a guy ended up dead.
Yeah.
And it does make me wonder, like, is this something that's a little bit more prevalent that no one's really talking about? I mean, there's always like the cliche that all the rich people are like doing drugs left and right and everything like that. But like, still they shouldn't. And not even just because like drugs are bad, like drugs can kill you.
Yeah.
And more than anything, I think having someone that is enabling it and making things worse, it just isn't good. I remember when they first were going after this trainer, I was like, well, that seems kind of odd. It kind of seems like they're just trying to point the finger at someone that had a drug problem. Well, yeah, it makes sense now because not he had a drug problem, absolutely, but like you're not making it any better. The Bible does kind of talk about this, that we have to surround ourselves with good people. Bad company corrupts good character.
Yeah.
You have to be careful about the people that you let influence you.
Yeah.
And not just because you could end up dead, but like there's a lot of bad decisions that people make because they're around the wrong people. And yeah, I really hope that Matt Harvey can come out of this. I did see that because of this testimony, baseball is considering a suspension, a 60-game suspension, which isn't as long as with steroids, but we'll see kind of what happens. Hopefully Harvey can get himself together. And I mean, there were times where he was absolutely awful last year.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like he can kind of, it would be what kind of awesome story would it be if like he revives himself on the Kansas City Royals or someone like that? That'd be really cool.
Yeah, you made a great point with the influence in getting away from people. And when things started to go south for him here in New York, FAN would always say, and it was probably Evan Roberts, or it might have been a few other folks that would always see him like at Ranger games, but he would always they would always say that they would be concerned because it seemed like he would be with like some people that seemed to be a bad element, that his entourage were guys that weren't good guys and that were probably doing drugs even back then. They never said that, the drugs, but they said, that he seemed to be with some really shady characters, even back then. So my guess is that he might have been one of those guys, or he might be one of those guys that's easily influenced, and hopefully he turns his life over. Would love to see him turn his life over to God, right? And maybe be easily influenced by the Bible, but I don't know where his faith is at. But it is definitely potential loss. He had the injury, right? He definitely had the injury, and that's a hard one to come back from. But he was going south before that, and now you kind of just realize why. If you're out late every night and you're not preparing, for your craft, I mean, just any of us, right, in any profession, it's not going to be good, but particularly for an athlete who is a top flight pitcher. I mean, he was considered one of the better pitchers in the league, let alone on the Mets, for a couple of years at least, so anyway, it's sad. You feel bad for the family that lost this young man, and but hopefully some good, like you said, comes out of this. All right. I didn't get any notice, so this is good. So we can actually take our time and do our wrap up here. And so we're going to do it in person next week, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to be sitting side by side, back to back, belly to belly. And so I'll start with our maybe wrap up on nicknames. We can come up with a few others. But for some reason, I was realizing this past week that the nickname Bubba has kind of been a lost one. It seems to me that there were a lot of Bubbas back in the day. And I would say the most famous Bubba now is, take a guess. Who do you think is the most famous Bubba in sports now?
The golf player. I don't remember his last name.
Bubba Watson, right?
Okay. I wanted to say Watson, but.
Yeah, Bubba Watson. There used to seem to be a lot of football players named Bubba back in the day. But the two other ones, well, I'll give you three. One is fictional. But for me as a kid, Bubba Smith was, really famous. And Bubba Smith was an excellent football player. He was huge. He was bigger than anybody else. But he turned out to be a really good defensive lineman for the Baltimore Colts back in the day. And then he shifted his career, became an actor. And he played in he was more famous for playing in a lot of the Police Academy movies. They made a ton of those back in the 80s, before your time. Go watch the first one. And you don't think stuff from the 80s is funny because you're like, just wait a minute. I don't get it. It's not funny, So humor is definitely a little different, but Police Academy movies were funny to me back in the day. He played in all of those, or most of those, I think. And so, and he acted in a few other things as well. And then there was, the Mets made a trade. I remember trading deadline. Guy was a really good player, came to the Mets that half a year, and it was just, he was okay. Then they got him from Tampa. But I don't think it was the trade that we're thinking about, that you would think about with Tampa at the trading deadline. But Bubba Trammell, do you remember him?
Oh, yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. Good hitter, good outfielder, but didn't do much that second half of the year. And I think that was the only time the Mets had him, just that half a year. But to me, one of the most famous Bubbas of all time is Bubba Gump. From the Forrest Gump movies. And actually, that's not really a character because, Forrest Gump and then his friend in the movie obviously was Bubba. And then when after he died, he took the money and they, his mom opens up the restaurant, but names half of it after Forrest Gump. So Bubba Gump, which, there's a few of those scattered throughout the country, Bubba Gump's seafood place. But I just always thought Bubba, that's a funny name. And I always think typically from, stereotyping here, but typically from someone from the South. You don't see too many folks named Bubba, from up here in New York. But anyway, all right, you shoot, and then you can wrap us up.
All right, I'm going 2 and 2 here. 2 for baseball because I'm still sad that baseball was supposed to start back up this week.
We'll talk about that next week, hopefully.
Yeah, we can talk about that next week. But kind of 2 recent names here. Kung Fu Panda. Our good friend Pablo Sandoval. He
didn't like that nickname, right? I think the rumor was he finally embraced it, but I think at first he didn't like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's one. One of those ones that just kind of stick out. Another one, I don't know if we've mentioned him. We just mentioned him here on the podcast, but Thor. Noah Syndergaard.
That's a good one. Yeah. Big dude, long blonde locks. That's a good one.
Yeah. So I have those 2 for baseball and 2 for basketball since it is the All-Star game weekend.
Yeah.
Also 2 players that are playing. Number 1, the Greek Freak. I don't think that there's any better nickname suited for him.
I wonder if he likes that.
I don't know.
But I don't think anybody, when they're interviewing him, call him that. Hey, Freak, can I ask you a question? I'll be curious whether he likes that nickname or not.
Yeah, because and I feel like it started especially early on because people just didn't know how to pronounce his name. Oh yeah, the Greek Freak. You know what I'm talking about. The other one, especially a guy that's made a lot of headway this week because of the trade, the process, Joel Embiid.
That's a good one. Now, how did he pick that up? It was more because the 76ers had always said, hey, we'll tank every year and, let's follow the process.
Yeah.
It's funny, out of all those draft picks, he's the only one left, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, see, the process works if you pick the right guys. They pick Markelle Fultz over a lot of different guys.
Yeah.
Obviously Ben Simmons is gone now.
Yeah.
Who else did they have in there?
They picked Noel first. Nerlens Noel.
Oh yeah, I think they did.
Yeah. And he didn't play much for them, right? Because he was hurt. He was hurt back then too.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that. And so I guess now they're just calling Embiid the process. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right. Well, we look forward to doing an in-person one next week. And so, Kenny, take us home.
All right. This is Kenny Squared End.
Kenny.
With sports on the positive tip. We will see you next week.
In the flesh. Well, he and I in the flesh, but not everybody else. All right. Talk to you later.